The night the city tried to freeze itself to death was the same night Gabriel Sterling finally realized success could still leave a man empty. The wind screamed through the streets, sharp and unforgiving, flinging snow like shards of glass against dark windows and silent cars. Gabriel walked fast through Henderson Park, jaw clenched, phone buzzing in his pocket with unread emails from a board meeting that had dragged on too long. At 38, he owned everything people said should matter: power, control, a company worth millions, and yet every step echoed with the same truth. He was alone. His ex-wife had taken their daughter Emma 3 years ago. His penthouse was spotless and lifeless. Holidays were no longer celebrations. They were reminders of everything he had lost. The Christmas lights tangled around bare trees glowed weakly, mocking him with cheer he no longer felt. He would have driven home if his driver had not called in sick. He would have waited for a car service if he had not been too tired to care. Walking was faster, and pain was familiar. That was when the voice cut through the wind. "Excuse me, sir." Gabriel stopped. His instincts screamed danger first. He turned slowly and saw a small boy standing near a snow-buried bench. 7, maybe 8 years old, too thin, too still. He wore a tan jacket clearly meant for autumn, not December. A red jumper stretched tight at the sleeves. Jeans rubbed white at the knees. Snow clung to his hair and eyelashes. His cheeks were burning red with cold, but it was his eyes that held Gabriel in place. They were wide, terrified, and desperate to look brave. "Yes," Gabriel said quietly, already scanning the darkness for an adult. The boy swallowed hard. "Sir, my baby sister is freezing. I don't know what to do." The words cracked halfway through and something in Gabriel snapped. He saw the bundle then, a tiny shape wrapped in a blanket too thin to be called protection. A baby, no older than a few months. Her face was flushed and unhealthy red. Her cries were weak, broken, and fatting. Gabriel did not need medical training to know that silence was worse than screaming. "Where are your parents?" he asked, already shrugging off his coat. The boy's shoulders trembled. "Mum left us here. She said she would be right back. That was before it got dark. I tried to keep Sarah warm, but she won't stop crying. And now she's getting quiet." His voice dropped to a whisper. "I remember Mum saying that's bad when Bobbies get quiet." "You're right," Gabriel said, his throat tight. "That's very bad." He wrapped his expensive coat around both children, cashmere swallowing them whole, shielding them from the wind. "What's your name?" "Timothy. Everyone calls me Tim." "I'm Gabriel. Listen to me, Tim. We need to get somewhere warm right now. Will you trust me?" Tim hesitated. The warning every child knows burned across his face. Don't talk to strangers, but his sister whimpered softly and fear won. Tim nodded, tears spilling. "Okay." Gabriel lifted Sarah carefully. She was frighteningly cold. His heart began to race. He measured distances in his mind. The hospital was 10 blocks, his apartment 6. He chose faster. "We're going to my place first. Then I am calling a doctor, I promise." Tim clung to his sleeve as they hurried through the snow. Gabriel's shoes slipped. Snow soaked through his trousers, but he felt nothing except the terrifying stillness of the baby in his arms. "How long were you out here?" Gabriel asked quietly. "I don't know, a long time. Mum said 10 minutes, but then it snowed more and she didn't come back. Did she forget us?" The question cut deeper than the cold. Gabriel didn't lie. "I don't know, but I am here now." They reached his building and the doorman froze at the sight. "Mr. Sterling, call my doctor now." Gabriel's voice left no room for questions. "Then call the police. Non-emergency. Tell them I found 2 abandoned children." In the lift, Sarah went silent completely. Gabriel felt panic rise like fire. His apartment was warm. He laid Sarah gently on the sofa, keeping her wrapped. Tim hovered, shaking. Gabriel knelt in front of him. "I need you to help me. Run to that room and bring every blanket you can find." Tim moved instantly. Gabriel rubbed the baby's tiny hands, whispering, "Stay with me, stay with me." When Tim returned, they built warmth layer by layer. Time dragged. Then the doorbell, the doctor, the police. Sarah stabilized, hypothermia but survivable. "You found them just in time." Gabriel sat with Tim's hands wrapped around hot chocolate. "You were brave," he said. "You saved her." Tim's voice shook. "Is she going to be okay?" "The doctor is helping her, and so are you." Detective Chen leaned forward gently. "Tim, tell me what happened." The truth spilled out in broken pieces. A mother struggling, a relapse. a promise to come back that shattered into hours alone in the dark. When the ambulance arrived, Tim clutched Gabriel's hand. "Don't leave us," Gabriel heard himself answer. "I want." And in that moment, without knowing it, his empty life began to break open. The hospital lights were too bright and too quiet at the same time, humming softly as if nothing extraordinary had just happened, as if two children had not been pulled back from the edge of death an hour earlier. Gabriel sat rigid in a plastic chair, his tailored coat draped around Tim's shoulders, watching nurses move behind glass walls with practiced calm. Sarah lay inside a heated cot, wires tracing the fragile rhythm of her tiny heart, her chest rising and falling with shallow determination. Every beat tightened something in Gabriel's chest he had not felt in years. Tim refused to sit anywhere except beside the cot, one small hand gripping the edge as if letting go might make his sister disappear again. Gabriel had canceled meetings without explanation, silenced his phone, ignored the empire he had spent his life building, because for the first time none of it mattered. Detective Chen returned with a folder tucked under her arm. "They found your mother," she said gently. Tim's face drained of color. Gabriel felt the question before it was asked. "Where is she?" "She was arrested a few blocks from the park, attempting to buy drugs. Child endangerment charges will follow." The words hung heavy. Tim stared at the floor. "She didn't mean to write." Gabriel chose his answer carefully. "She made very bad choices. That doesn't mean she doesn't love you." "But love alone isn't enough." The doctor approached then. "Sarah is stable. She'll need overnight monitoring, but she's responding well. You brought her in just in time. If you'd waited longer." Gabriel nodded, unable to speak. The relief hit him like exhaustion. Tim exhaled shakily. "Can I stay with her?" "You can stay as long as you want," the doctor said with a smile. The hours that followed blurred into forms, signatures, quiet reassurance. At dawn, a social worker arrived, eyes tired, voice careful. She explained systems and procedures, placements and possibilities. None of them sounded safe. None of them sounded kind. Gabriel listened, then surprised himself by asking what would happen if he took them temporarily. The room went silent. "You understand the responsibility," the woman said. "You're a single man. You run a company." "I understand," Gabriel replied. "But I also understand what happens to children like this when no one steps forward." Tim looked up, hope flickering, fragile as glass. "Please." The inspection was rushed but thorough. Space, resources, security. At 3 in the morning, permission was granted on an emergency basis. Gabriel drove home with the city asleep around them. Tim watched snow slide down the windows, his fingers never leaving Sarah's carrier. Back in the apartment, warmth replaced fear. Gabriel moved clumsily but carefully, bottles, blankets, soft light. Tim finally slept curled on the sofa, clutching Gabriel's sleeve as if afraid to wake alone. Gabriel stayed awake, watching them, breathing, counting each rise and fall. The sun rose on a life he had never planned. The news broke before breakfast. Headlines painted him a hero, angel, guardian. Gabriel ignored it all. He hired help, learned routines, sat through therapy sessions and midnight cries. Tim woke screaming from dreams of cold nights and empty benches. Sarah cried with the force of a storm. Gabriel learned to answer both. He learned patience. He learned fear. He learned love. Tim asked questions that cut deep. "Will Mum come back? Will you send us away?" Gabriel never lied. "I don't know, but I promise I won't disappear." The days turned into weeks. Court dates loomed. The past circled like a shadow. One evening, Tim asked quietly why Gabriel was helping us. Gabriel answered honestly, "Because once I was very lonely too, and someone should have helped me." The knock at the door came late, unexpected. Detective Chen stood there grim. "They want to move the children tomorrow, standard procedure." Gabriel felt the ground shift. Tim overheard panic flooding his eyes. "No, please." "I'll fight it," Gabriel said, but nothing was guaranteed. And as Tim held Sarah tighter, Gabriel realized love might not be enough to save them this time. The morning light spilled weakly through Gabriel's apartment, catching on scattered toys, blankets, and the lingering frost of last night's snowstorm. Tim stirred first, still clutching Sarah's carrier, her tiny hand resting on his arm as if seeking reassurance that she was still safe. Gabriel, bleary-eyed from a night of constant vigilance, smiled softly. They were alive. Both of them. That was enough for now. Court would come later. The system, social workers, and bureaucracy might have complicated their lives, but in this quiet moment nothing else mattered. The phone rang. It was Detective Chen, calm but deliberate. "Gabriel, we've located Diane. She's in custody and under supervision. She's admitted to her relapse and the neglect that endangered the children." Tim's eyes widened, fear and confusion mixing. Gabriel knelt beside him, keeping one hand firm on the boy's shoulder. "Tim, listen to me. Your mum is sick. Not like a cold, not like a flu. Her brain is sick with something called addiction. It makes her make dangerous choices even if she loves you. She's going to get help now, but it will take a long time. This is not your fault, none of it. You just have to be a kid. The grown-ups take care of the hard parts." Tim was silent for a long moment, absorbing the words, the gravity of it, and finally whispered, "I'm glad you found us. I'm glad you're not a bad stranger." Gabriel's phone buzzed again. The court was ready to see them. He stood, lifting Sarah carefully into his arms, her warm body now glowing with health thanks to careful monitoring and the makeshift care he'd improvised. Tim's small hand slid into his. They moved together through the hospital halls, strangers watching silently, some nodding in approval, some confused by the single man walking with two traumatized children as if it were the most natural thing in the world. At the courthouse, the judge listened carefully to the situation. Diane's neglect, the children's well-being, Gabriel's care. Reports confirmed the children were thriving in his temporary guardianship, that Sarah had recovered fully, that Tim was adjusting well despite his fears. "Mr. Sterling," the judge said, peering over her glasses, "you've taken responsibility for these children in extraordinary circumstances. Child Services recommends temporary foster custody with monthly reviews. Do you understand the responsibility?" Gabriel nodded. "I do, Your Honor, and I accept it." Tim peeked around Gabriel's legs, holding Sarah close. The boy's trust was cautious but present. "They're okay now," Gabriel whispered, squeezing his hand. "We'll make sure nothing like last night ever happens again." The judge continued. "Your commitment will be reviewed, but given the stability you've provided, the children will remain in your care for now." Relief washed over Gabriel, mixed with a surge of protectiveness that had nothing to do with law or money. These children were his responsibility, yes, but more than that, they had already become his family. Weeks turned into months. Gabriel adapted. He hired a nanny, Mrs. Chen, who understood children and chaos and the art of managing both. Therapists worked with Tim on his fears, his mistrust, and his sudden exposure to a safe home. Gabriel learned how to make bottles again, how to soothe a screaming infant, how to sit quietly beside a child who had seen too much of the world already. He learned that Tim was sharp, curious, fiercely protective of Sarah, and endlessly brave despite the trauma he carried. He learned Sarah had lungs that could make any adult panic if hungry, and that a baby's small body held enormous resilience. One evening, as the city lights glimmered through the frost-laden windows, Gabriel, Tim, and Sarah built a blanket fort in the living room. Sarah slept peacefully in her carrier, tucked into blankets that smelled like warmth and safety. Tim leaned against him, a rare smile brightening his face. "I'm not scared anymore," he said quietly. Gabriel ruffled his hair. "You never have to be, not here, not ever again." News about Gabriel's actions had spread quietly. Social media called him a hero, a guardian angel. Gabriel ignored it. He didn't need recognition. What mattered was the small hands clutching his own, the fragile body sleeping soundly beside him, and the whispered thank yous from two children who had learned to trust again. Months later, Diane voluntarily terminated her parental rights, finally sober and acknowledging that she could not provide what her children needed. In a supervised meeting, she looked at Gabriel and said, "Promise me you'll tell them I love them, that I tried, that I wasn't strong enough, but they were always worth everything." Gabriel promised. "They'll know who you are, they'll know the truth, and they'll always be loved." The adoption was finalized on a snowy December afternoon, nearly 2 years to the day from that night in Henderson Park. Tim, now 9, held Sarah, now 2, as the judge declared them Gabriel Sterling's children. Gabriel watched them, feeling the weight and wonder of family finally resting on his shoulders. Toys littered the floor, books stacked haphazardly, laughter echoing through the apartment that was no longer empty. Emma, visiting from California, embraced her new siblings effortlessly. "Dad, they're perfect," she said, holding Sarah while Tim showed her his latest science experiment. Gabriel looked at them all, a life he had never imagined unfolding before him. Work still waited, meetings still called, but none of that mattered in the same way. He had discovered a truth money could never buy. Love, courage, and family could appear in the most unexpected moments. And sometimes, a stranger willing to step forward could change everything.